Hi teachers, in this set of videos we're going to look at Unit 7, which is Introduction to Decimals. So in the past you probably haven't spent a whole week just introducing decimals, but I think you're going to be really surprised when you do these lessons with your students and see what a really narrow understanding they have of decimals. So first, a lot of students don't connect the idea that decimals are in fact fractions, okay? They just see the extended place value and they don't really know what those place values mean. So in this unit we spend a lot of time really focusing on different representations and connecting representations and language. And our main means of doing this, we're going to use number lines, but we're going to use this decimal grid. So I highly recommend, no matter what you skip, do not skip the decimal grid. And it seems really basic and it's probably tempting to do this for them, but it's really important for them to learn this process on their own. So basically starting off with a grid, and we're now calling this the unit. And it's going to look like our base 10 blocks that we used in Number Sense 1. But kind of in reverse, and in the end this is going to look like a flat, but we're saying that this represents 1. So you'll have them use a ruler or straight edge and connect these lines, and then some basic simple questions. So this is what their figure should look like. Okay. So we've talked about fractions, so they should be able to count that these are 10 equal pieces and that each piece is 1/10. Okay. We're going to use, if you have highlighters, crayons, pencils, something, okay, we use orange and yellow for these. And this is how it is in Math AS, and it's really great if you can do this because the color really helps them connect to the relative size of the piece. So shade 3 parts, equal parts with an orange highlighter. So here they are in orange. You get the gist. But we'll refer to these as many things, but originally as orange strips. So we'll call this one orange strip, and one orange strip would be 1/10. Okay. Then you give them a new grid, okay, and have them not use their old grid. They're going to cut these into tenths this way, and then you'll basically have 100 equal pieces. And have them find these. How many pieces is this cut into? Then they should know the fraction name. And now notice it says shade 30 small squares with a yellow highlighter. Okay. And in the video I have this all set up, but they might have to refer back to their page. And we want them to connect the idea that these two representations are equivalent. So they should have a base understanding. We use these types of area models with fractions, but again, I think you'll be surprised. They'll say here that these are equivalent, but we'll talk about what they might do later. Okay. So these activities, really just having them go through these and connect these ideas to fraction before we build on decimal fractions. Okay. And now there's quite a few problems where we use things like 6 out of 10 equal parts, 40 out of 100 equal parts. We talk about the orange strips, the yellow squares, fraction numbers. So the fraction, so this would be 6/10, word name, and then also writing it as an equivalent number of yellow squares or orange strips. So again, really connecting all of these ideas. Okay. The language, the fraction number, the fraction word name, which is the same as our decimal word name, so really building these together. Equivalent number of orange strips and yellow squares. So here's one that you should keep your eye out. I'd be surprised if somebody in your class doesn't do this. So 5 out of 10 and 3 out of 100 equal parts. A lot of my students would do this. They recognize that the 5 out of 10 is orange, but they draw this. And I ask them, I'm like, why are the orange and the yellow the same size? So this is supposed to be 5 out of 10. Show me where the 10 is. And they'll say that once they cut them into tenths in this direction, they think of one column as 10. So they're not using the right reference unit fraction. Okay, so you have to remind them that this whole grid represents 1, and that even though now it's cut into more squares, 10 out of 100 is 1/10. So that's why it's important for them to have this orange strip idea so they can see it going from the top to the bottom. Okay, so 5 of those, 3 of those, and I think you get the gist. Okay, then let me go back to the media lesson packet. So in section 7.2, we start to discuss place value in decimals. Okay, so the idea in, I think, number sense, the unit 1 in the 081 workbook, we talked about how if you move one place value to the right, it's 10 times as large as the place value before it. So now we're going to decimals, and we talk about this in the reverse direction now that we have language for 1/10 times as large or 1/10 as large. So we say, notice that 1 is 1/10 of 10, 10 is 1/10 of 100, so we're starting to build these tenths. So now we can build the decimal value by continuing this pattern. Divide 1 by 10 and we have the 1/10ths place. Divide 1/10 by 10, we have the 100ths place, and they've seen that in the grid already. And then just extending this idea to thousandths. So we don't do much beyond the thousandths place. They could understand this concept in general continuing on, but we focus on really these place values to help them build their understanding of decimal. And here's a chart we use a lot. There's your decimal point. There's tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay. So now, again, we're still using these grids, and this may seem a lot like a lot of grids, okay? But it's really important for them to connect these ideas. To us, these look almost identical. To them, these are brand new problems. So now we have 57 hundredths. So what is 57 hundredths as a decimal? They may be confused by the 50, okay? They may not think of that as orange strips, which is fine, okay? They may shade 57 of them yellow, okay? But then when they write that as a decimal, they need to see that that's equivalent to 5 in the tenths place and 7 in the hundredths place. We also start talking about expanded form, something that's a little different with expanded form than what we did in Unit 1. So if we had 213 in Unit 1, the expanded form, we wrote it as 200 plus 10 plus 3. Okay, and we had originally thought of writing it, we wanted to show that it was 2 times 100 plus 1 times 10 plus 3 times 1. So this is how we had it originally set up to write the expanded form, because we really wanted to stress the place value. But if you remember in Unit 1, we hadn't really even talked about operations yet when we did this. So we thought, this is a little bit too much. We're just going to use this form. Okay, but now that we've talked about all the operations, when we use expanded form, okay, we're going to say 5 copies of 1/10 plus 7 copies of 1/100th. Okay, so we want to show that, use the multiplication and the 1/10 and the 100th as unit fractions like we did in Unit 5 or 6, 5. Okay, let's go back. Okay. Notice again, here we write them in fraction form and have them write all the different forms, so just connecting these ideas and building a robust understanding. Okay. Then giving them decimal forms, having them shade them and write them in the equivalent other forms. And now we're going to extend this to the thousandths place. Okay, so it's hard to think. We really want them to understand the idea of relative size. Okay, so the orange strip is 10 times as large as 1/100th. So how do we break this into 10 pieces to let them really see that? So we use this zoom. I think they should all understand zoom by now from their phones and whatnot. And then we cut this into 10 equal pieces. Okay, so for the 6,000ths, they should shade 6 of these. We use blue for this. And then try to get close to shading an equivalent portion in the grid so they could see what that would be relatively. So I'm going to take a blue. So I'm just going to do the thousandths part. So they can see that this would be 6,000ths. Okay, and then relative to this little square, and we always put it in this corner, just it would probably be better if it was continuous, but it's nice to have one spot to put it. You know, you're not going to be perfect. It should be a little bit more than half if you can get it that way. But again, the idea is for them to see that this 6, because they think of 6 is larger than 3 and 4, but relative to the unit, this is a teeny bit of a square. And just like we did before, we use all these different forms, 500ths and 7,000ths, 304,000ths. So they're going to have to connect that. Each one of these is 10,000ths. Okay, so this would be a whole orange strip would be 100,000ths. Okay, and these are not trivial ideas. Let them grapple with them a little bit. And then we give them decimal forms and have them work in the other direction. Okay, and in the next video, we'll start on section 7.3.